So there are different types of alimony in Connecticut. There's the type that gets paid during the divorce, right? So in some cases, we have alimony during the divorce. And that means that while you're in the divorce process, one spouse is paying the other alimony. Not all couples need this. Sometimes they both have incomes that are generally the same and they're able to pay their bills. Sometimes they keep using their joint account to pay household bills out of, and money doesn't need to flow any differently than it did during the marriage. Honestly, I would say that that's probably most common, that there isn't alimony pendente lite, which is the word we use for while the divorce is pending. Now, that's not true though. So we have the option of turning on alimony during a divorce while it's pending if something's changed. So think about a situation where a spouse isn't contributing to the joint account that the way they used to, or the spouses are fighting about the joint account and so they want to separate their assets to sort of take down the temperature. In that case, we might see a payment going from one spouse to another during the divorce. The other thing we see during the divorce is things like an arrangement for how to pay bills, right? So instead of I write my spouse a check that spouse uses to pay bills, sometimes the agreement that you enter and then the court enters as an order of the court is I'll pay the mortgage and you pay for all of the kids' private school tuition. Sometimes we divide bills that way. I'm in charge of this bill, you're in charge of that bill. So that while the divorce is pending, we're handling all of the family bills. And that might look pretty different when you're actually divorced as opposed to how it looks during the divorce. Or it might look the same. If we turn on alimony during a divorce and it winds up making sense long term, that might be kind of looking like how the alimony continues on the other side of the divorce as well. So one type of alimony in Connecticut is the alimony that actually happens during a divorce while a divorce is pending. Another type of alimony in Connecticut is the type of alimony that most people think of when they think about alimony or spousal support. And what that is post-divorce alimony. So while we're figuring out how to divide property during your divorce, how parenting will work if you have children, we also are talking about whether there will be alimony, and if there will be alimony, so how much there will be, and for how long it will last. So those are the main things we think about when we are talking about post-divorce alimony. 1, is there going to be any at all? 2, what's the amount? 3, how long is it going to last? Sometimes alimony lasts until someone retires. Sometimes alimony lasts for a period of years. Sometimes alimony lasts for a lifetime. That's far less common than it used to be, but it does happen. So those factors are some of the reasons that you really want to talk to an experienced divorce lawyer at the beginning of your divorce so you can get a sense of what alimony might look like, if there is any, and how long it might last. Often when we start working with people, they have a lot of concerns around alimony. What they really are is a concern about their financial future, right? Someone who thinks they might pay alimony is concerned about whether they can afford to pay the alimony and also live their life going forward. Someone that thinks that they might receive alimony is concerned about whether or not they'll have sufficient funds post-divorce to be financially secure. And I think it's important to just acknowledge the reality that for many people, post-divorce, they're supporting 2 households instead of 1 household. And the court gets that, right? The lawyers who practice in family court understand that often 2 households are more expensive than 1. Another thing about couples with children is that we really want the children to have bedrooms and both houses and it's not going to be identical, but access to the same sorts of things in both of their parents' homes because they're going from 1 home to 2 homes. And we don't want those 2 homes to look like 1 mansion and 1 studio where the kids don't have beds, right? That's not the goal. So when you think about alimony, understand that the way the court views this is to make sure everyone is okay as possible going forward, understanding that it's expensive to have a family have two homes instead of one. Although to the person paying alimony, it can sometimes feel like a stretch. Very rarely do we see it be something that would even approach being financially crippling, right? When the court is looking at this, the court's looking at the family's assets as a whole and cash flow as a whole, and trying to get money distributed in a way that allows for both people to have two safe, fine, happy households well into the future. So when the court decides whether there's going to be alimony, and if there is going to be alimony, how long it's going to last, the court looks at factors that are going to sound familiar to you if you've watched any of my videos on property division, because there's a lot of overlap there. What they're going to look at is how much the spouses earn, what the ages of the spouses are, what their income is, what their educational background is, what their future prospects for employment and earnings are. Those are the things that the court is going to look at to decide whether or not one spouse might need a boost going into the future. So one of the terms people sometimes use for alimony is rehabilitative alimony. It's not in the statutes anywhere in Connecticut, but you still hear the word get tossed around. And I think it can be useful because it does illustrate a concept that we sometimes see. Sometimes when a family has smaller children, particularly, one spouse may take a step back from their career, either in whole or in part, to be the primary boots on the ground caregiver for the children. And what that means is that that person's future income might be impacted by the fact that they took a step back from the job force. I find the words rehabilitative alimony a little bit offensive and inaccurate because I don't think we're rehabilitating someone who did a great job taking care of children. But what it refers to is the concept that that person post-divorce, as the children don't need the same level of parental support as they might have at an earlier point, that person might need a bit of a runway to get their career relaunched or reinvigorated. They might want to take a certification. They might go back for a graduate degree. They might make a career change. And so alimony can bridge the gap between where they are now and where they're shooting to go in their career in the future. So there are a lot of things that impact whether or not there'll be alimony at all. And then how courts tend to view whether or not that alimony will last for a few years or a number of years. And it's important to talk to someone that spends a lot of time working on cases in the Connecticut divorce courts and is very familiar with how courts tend to view alimony in different circumstances, so that you have the best sense possible of how things might shake out for your family. After we've determined that there's going to be alimony in a case, one of the things we have to think about is how long it'll last for, right? What the duration of alimony will be. And obviously, this is of a big concern, both to people who would potentially be receiving alimony. How long is it going to come for? Or how long they're going to be paying alimony. How long do I have to write this check for? And the factors that come into play on that are the same factors that we consider when we're deciding whether or not there'll be alimony at all. The length of the marriage, the spouse's income potential, the age of the parties, right? Whether or not someone is retired, whether or not someone has health issues. All of these things determine not just whether there'll be alimony, not just how much the alimony will be, but also how long it will last. So this is an extremely fact-dependent analysis, and it really is about the two people that are in the marriage and what's happening in both of their lives. So, a lot of people want to know about whether or not they can modify their alimony after a divorce. And the answer is a classic answer that it depends. It depends what is in the actual orders of your divorce. So, for example, if your court order says alimony is non-modifiable, then alimony is non-modifiable. That is an order of the court, absent a few little caveats. But generally speaking, your court order will dictate whether or not alimony is modifiable. Sometimes court orders say things like, may be modified in the future. Okay, but how do I know whether or not that may is a will? How do I know when it might be modified in the future? And most commonly, alimony is modifiable in the future, assuming that the court order allows it from your divorce. It's most commonly modifiable in the future if there's been a substantial change in circumstances. So if someone loses a job, if someone gets a new, much higher paying job, those are the types of situations in which we might see a court being open to the idea of modifying alimony. So sometimes people wonder about what the whole dollar of alimony thing is. So sometimes in people's divorce agreements, there will be a provision where a spouse pays another spouse $1 of alimony a year. And it seems a little bit crazy. So sometimes it makes sense to dig into like why that is so that there's a better understanding of it. And the reason for the dollar of alimony is that in some circumstances, at the time of the divorce, the parties agree or the judge orders that there won't be alimony right then, right? No alimony right now. But there's another reason that they think that they might need alimony in the future. Something might happen so that alimony would be appropriate in the future. In those cases, sometimes the lawyers will put into the agreement a dollar of alimony provision. And what that means is because there's a dollar of alimony, that gives the court the ability to go back in down the line if there's a change in circumstances and actually make a more substantial alimony award. So it's a bit of a legal fiction placeholder to allow the parties to come back to court in the future and actually have more substantial alimony awarded. Alimony is a big factor in divorces, and it's something that people get really concerned about when they're thinking about divorce. So my recommendation is to give us a call and start working with us early so that we can make the best plan for your future and get you the information and understanding that you need.